Hi there, and welcome to my channel. If you would please hit the subscribe button on your way in, I would greatly appreciate it. And if you like what you see, hit the like. It's free and it helps get me out in that algorithm. Alright, let's get on to today's topic. So first, I want to say thank you everybody for still hanging around. I have been crazy busy with trying to get this nail business off the ground and doing all these markets and really trying to network and get myself out there. So today, I am just going to do a crime cast, one of our stories. It's another Michigan story, and it was an unsolved mystery, which is one of my favorites, until a few years later. And let me explain how I decided on this story real quick. I was sitting there trying to think while I was doing nails, what in the world, what story I wanted to cover next. And I really liked the cold cases and the unsolved mysteries and things like that. And so I started thinking about a story I had watched a really long time ago. And it was about a husband that had murdered his wife in Michigan and had covered it up. And then years later, through her family fighting for justice for her, it came to find out that this was not a natural death like they thought, like it was shown to be. Well, anyway, I could not for the life of me think of the people's names, and I was going over and over it in my head. So I thought, all right, I had some custom orders to work on, so I thought I'm just going to put it on Unsolved Mysteries on Pluto, because they've got that channel that runs live mysteries all the time. The Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack, the OG. And I was beside myself because I turned it on. It finished up the last episode, and then all of a sudden, boom, it starts the next one, and guess what episode it was? It was the episode of this case. So I thought, all right, that is a sign that this is what I'm supposed to go over this week. So, here we go. Let's get into it. Okay, now our case begins with the main character, David Richard Davis. That was his full name. He went by aliases of Dave Davis. He was wanted for murder, the murder of his wife, and he had been missing since October of 1981. 43-year-old David Davis was wanted for the murder of his wife, 25-year-old registered nurse Shannon Mohr Davis. She was still living at home with her parents, Bob and Lucille Mohr, when she met David, then 34, at a wedding party in Sylvania, Ohio, on August 4th, 1979. He was a former University of Michigan graduate student in pharmacology. Just 8 weeks later, David and Shannon married in Las Vegas. They moved to a farm in the small Michigan farming community of Pittsford. On July 23, 1980, they prepared to go for a sunset horseback ride. Within an hour, she was dead. He claimed that she was an inexperienced rider. When they reached the edge of the woods, she lost control and fell off of her horse, striking her head violently on the ground. His simple and plausible story was immediately accepted and believed by Shannon's family and friends. Lucille felt that Shannon's marriage was made in heaven. She began to love David. Bob described him as a man's man. He was an outdoor person who liked hunting and fishing. Bob said he was very manly and likable. Lucille thought that he would protect Shannon from anything. She had no idea what he was really like. After Shannon's death, Bob and Lucille began to discover that David was not the man he seemed to be. They began to find clues in his behavior, which led them to believe that her death was not an accident. He had since disappeared, and there was a warrant out for his arrest. But Bob and Lucille were afraid that he may have gotten away with the perfect crime. Once Shannon got to the hospital, she was pronounced dead from the injuries caused by her fall. Minutes later, Bob and Lucille were surprised and upset when David insisted that she be cremated. They wanted to take her body back to her hometown of Toledo to be buried there, but David claimed that she wanted to be cremated. Bob and Lucille did not believe that she would have wanted that because it conflicted with their religious beliefs. Bob planned to get a temporary restraining order to stop David from doing it. However, he eventually gave in and allowed her to be buried. That night, Lucille could not sleep. She remembered that Bob had caught David in a lie about life insurance. Bob had asked him if he had life insurance on Shannon, and he said no. He also said that he was nearly broke. However, Lucille had recalled Shannon telling her the day after her honeymoon that he had taken out a large life insurance policy on her. It expired around the time of her death. That was the first lie that Lucille would pick up, but it would not be the last. 3 days later, Shannon was buried. Bob and Lucille noticed that David seemed unmoved. He did not seem to care that she was dead. After the funeral, they found out that he had lived a life of deceit. Previously, he told them he was an orphan. However, this was disproven when his parents showed up at the funeral. He had bragged that he had been wounded in Vietnam. His parents said he was never in the service. They also told Bob and Lucille that he was not a millionaire, which was something he told Shannon when they met. He also lied about attending medical school. When David met Bob and Lucille, he told them that he had never been married before. However, he had. In fact, he'd been so for 10 years and had 2 daughters, something Shannon found out about only days before she died. He was allegedly abusive towards his first wife, and with all the lies coming out, Lucille began to wonder if he had killed Shannon. She soon became certain that he had done so. However, she did not know what they could do without any evidence to prove it. Okay, now wait till you hear this. 2 days after the burial, 6 separate insurance companies contacted the funeral home. Heard that right. 6. Requesting copies of Shannon's death certificate. Her death left David the beneficiary of $330,000. Bob then discovered that Dave may have been involved in other insurance scams. A few years before Shannon's death, he apparently burned down a farmhouse across the road from his old house. He had allegedly set other fires and faked a head injury when he worked for an automotive company. He faked the injury so he could collect disability. Bob believed that he was trying to live on insurance money. He got bigger each time, starting with arson and ending apparently with murder. At Bob and Lucille's insistence, Shannon's body was exhumed. The medical examiner found injuries on it consistent with a fall from a horse. Indications of an unknown drug, however, were found in it as well. But the medical report still ruled her death an accident. 3 months later, an article in the Detroit Free Press exposed David's alleged insurance swindles. The case was then reopened, and then he moved to Florida. Detective Don Brooks was assigned to the investigation. He felt that the information contained in the newspaper article was phenomenal and indicated foul play was involved in Shannon's death. He contacted the toxicologist Dr. Robert Forney, who had earlier found traces of the unknown drug in Shannon's body. Dr. Forney explained that his laboratory had a very large number of chemicals that they compared to the one found in her body. He noted that there were over 250,000 in common use. Initially, they were able to search for and rule out about 1,000 of them. He told Detective Brooks that he needed some help to identify the chemical. Dr. Forney asked for information regarding David's background. Detective Brooks told him that David was a dirt farmer who had several large animals on his farm. Dr. Forney and Detective Brooks contacted veterinarians in the area that may have serviced David. Detective Brooks asked them if they knew of any drugs that they used on a large farm animals that could affect the muscular or nervous systems. One of them provided him with the name of a drug, succinylcholine chloride, an animal tranquilizer. It causes massive paralysis of the muscles responsible for breathing. Dr. Forney ran tests on it. It matched perfectly to the sample taken from Shannon's body. Next, Detective Brooks had to connect the drug to David. He determined that several years earlier, David had taken part in a deer hunting camp, at which its members used succinylcholine chloride to hunt deer. Shannon's cousin also reported seeing the drug at their farm, along with several syringes. Shannon was exhumed a second time. 2 injection marks were found, one on her shoulder and one on her wrist. Several bruises were also found there. Samples taken from the second autopsy were also found to contain succinylcholine chloride. Detective Brooks contacted Bob and Lucille and told them that they had enough evidence to arrest David. And on October 13th, 1981, a grand jury issued a first-degree murder warrant for David. Detective Brooks believes that he pushed or coaxed Shannon off of her horse, wrestled her to the ground, and then paralyzed her with a lethal tranquilizer. He then struck her on the head with a rock so that the injuries would appear accidental. Detective Brooks is certain that her death was a premeditated murder. He believes that David married her to kill her and profit from it. When police went to arrest David, though, he was nowhere to be found. They came close to capturing him in Port-au-Prince, Haiti on Christmas 1981, but he fled, leaving behind his sailboat. Lucille wanted him to get caught and locked up for what he did to her daughter. She wanted him to feel all the times that they were breathing down his back. She would not let go until he was caught, and she knew it would not bring Shannon back, but she wanted him to be put away so that he could not hurt anyone else. Now, this is the part that I love the most about this, is that this case first aired on November 29th, 1987. It was special number 4 episode on Unsolved Mysteries. It was the very first case profiled by host Robert Stack. It then went on to be on America's Most Wanted after his flight from Haiti, and it was also documented on American Justice, Forensic Files, and The New Detectives. And after his capture, it was actually made into a TV movie called Victim of Love, the Shannon Mohr story. Now, the results of that being aired were that he was captured within days of a December 28, 1998 repeat broadcast of Unsolved Mysteries. He was captured. A viewer in the United States contacted the police and identified him as a former boyfriend named David Meyer Bell. He was living in the village of Tafuna on a tiny island chain of American Samoa in the South Pacific, 2,000 miles south of Hawaii. He had previously obtained a Florida driver's license under that name. 3 days later, on January 6, 1989, he was arrested. Police learned that in 1985 he had fled to American Samoa, where he lived in a one-room shack. Before that, he had lived in Florida, Haiti, and Alaska, among other places. In 1986, he married a 20-year-old Samoan woman. He told her that his first wife had died in a tragic accident. In American Samoa, David had obtained a job as a chief pilot for Samoa Air, a small commercial airline. He was apprehended on his way to work at the airport in Pago Pago. He was extradited to Honolulu, Hawaii, where he admitted his identity and voluntarily agreed to return to Michigan to stand trial. In return, federal authorities dropped charges of unlawful flight and kept the murder charges. 3.5 weeks later, he was returned to Michigan to stand trial for Shannon's murder. In November 1989, David went on trial. An ex-girlfriend testified that several years prior to Shannon's murder, he had told her about a murder that he had been committed using succinylcholine chloride. He said using the drug to commit murder would be the perfect crime. Another ex-girlfriend claimed that they dated before and after he was married to Shannon. A week before the marriage, he told the girlfriend that he would not see her for a year because he was doing something dangerous that would make him $200,000. A month before Shannon's murder, he told her that his assignment would continue for a few more weeks. On the day of Shannon's murder, David did not let her nephew or the dogs accompany them on their horseback ride, even though they normally did. He also did not let his neighbor's son ride with them, even though he had done so before. And when police investigated the scene, Shannon's shoes were found 8 feet from a bloody rock. They were given back to David, and then they disappeared. And after her death, several witnesses noticed scratches on his face and hands. Shortly after the funeral, he went on a trip with his second ex-girlfriend, but did not tell her about Shannon's death. Now, even though David's attorneys tried to say that the test for succinylcholine chloride was flawed, on December 5, 1999, after 2.5 hours of deliberation, a Michigan jury convicted him of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. On November 9, 2014, after serving 25 years, David died in prison at the age of 70. I hope you enjoyed today's case, and Cutsy out.